Hi everyone, today I want to share how I made watercolor ground so that my canvases could be painted on with watercolor and absorb. One of the problems with canvases is that when you paint them with gesso, the gesso is very water resistant. The reason acrylics work with a gessoed canvas is because acrylics have a polymer that actually gets onto that canvas and adheres to the surface of the substrate on the gessoed canvas. But watercolor is different. It needs something extremely porous without any gloss in it. And so the way I've been able to work with that is come up with a watercolor ground homemade. So this is part of the experiment. I did all of these first. Didn't care for some of the effects, and I just kept switching around the ingredients a little bit. And then I came up with something that I thought would work really well, and it actually came out real well because I used less gesso and increased the calcium carbonate and the baking soda as I went along. So in here, these two I liked. I like this one too. This was 1 part gesso, 2 parts calcium carbonate, which looks like this. It's calcium carbonate. Actually, calcium carbonate is the same thing you find in your vitamin, a calcium mineral, when you take your calcium. It's the same thing. Sometimes they call this French yeast. They use it for wine and beer making, things like that, and breads and things. But this is calcium carbonate human grade, and I'm using it to make the substrate watercolor ground. So here it was 1 part gesso, 2 parts calcium carbonate, 2 parts baking soda. And there was a nice and a 1/2 part water. The water is adjustable as you go, as you need. But you could see here it started to spread out a little, which is what I wanted. I didn't want it to just suck in there and stay there. And then this part was 1 part gesso, 2 parts calcium carbonate, and 3 parts baking soda. So I increased the baking soda here, and I think that made a big difference. It's a bit rougher, feels more absorbent, more porous. And then when I went over to here, 1 part gesso, 3 parts calcium carbonate, 4 parts baking soda. I got very rough. You could see, I don't know if you can see the grain on that. I didn't sand it, but it was almost too heavy to spread. It just stayed in its spot. So I kind of liked what was going on here, right in here. So I made the recipe then to match that. It's 1 part gesso, 2 parts calcium carbonate, and 3 parts baking soda. And I think you could actually add a little more of the calcium carbonate as you go. And then it says a 1/2 part water. Well, that's just enough to get this stuff started. And you will probably want to add a little water squirt as you go, because this stuff is very, very thick. And I've heard of some people making their own, and they strain it through a nylon. But I will not be doing that. I didn't find a need for it to strain it. I just keep mixing until the baking soda lumps go out. And then what I do is paint it onto the canvas, and then I sand the canvas once it's got a very decent thick coat of this on there. So the canvas is like this. I've painted a coating on it. You can see it's a little textured, and that's fine if you like that. And then what I do is I sand it down. I have not sanded this yet, but I'll sand it down and get it a bit smoother. And I'll use 2 coats of this formula. And when I did that, you can see here I got some of the results I wanted. I was able to get some blending and some splattering and some highly detailed effects on this. Typical watercolor effects. And so it came out really well. Here's another one I did using that same combination of my substrate for the do-it-yourself watercolor ground. So I hope this was informative. I would say you want to experiment a little bit. I kind of, you know, your mood will change on what you want to do from day to day, but I think going with 1 part gesso, 2 parts calcium carbonate, 3 parts baking soda, ½ part water just to get it mixed up as a paste, and then go ahead and add a little more water as you go. If you've added too much water, you can wait a few minutes and let it air dry. But then this should go on nice, very nice onto your canvas. Paint it on. Let it dry at least 2 days, because it just works out better that way. I experimented a day later and it just didn't come out right. So I think maybe the humidity in the air has something to do with it. But I let it dry at least 2 days till it was bone dry. Then I sanded it. Then I wiped it off with a wet paper towel, barely damp, just barely, and then began to paint right onto the surface in watercolor, and I did get the effects that I wanted, as you saw. So I hope this was helpful. Please like and subscribe if you have any suggestions or comments or any other kind of watercolor painting you want to see. I'll be happy to work on that for you. God bless you. Be safe and check back in again. Take care. Bye-bye.